All right, the math professor is on the air. I have to apologize for not getting class underway a bit more smartly. However, I've had a couple of technical difficulties. However, Mr. Nez is not impressed by that. He says, "Damn it, man, I paid for this class to get underway promptly." All right. All right, there's the Zoom meeting. Let's share the screen. That's the screen I want to share. All right. We all live by some kind of code of morals or ethics. Well, why do we do that? Okay, troopers, this is a participatory discussion here. So James, why do you think we live by some set of ethics or morals?
Traffic light, we have green, we have yellow, we have red. So it's some sort of law that can lead us not making mistake of that, something that we have to follow. How can you travel or live? Things like that.
Okay, so if I may summarize, part of that, of what you're saying seems to be so that we can predict people's behavior. So that's certainly one reason that we might live within an ethical structure. You have a green light, you know you can go, and people are not just going to rush out into the intersection where you hit them. So that is that's true. Look, we all have some sense of what we call, what philosophers call mores. Mores is the root word that morals come from. And mores are modes of behavior that we all agree on, and that kind of makes sense to us. And that may be to varying degrees. mores are tied up with culture. So, here in America, we have mores that we think of as part of the American culture, that in other countries would be bad behavior. For example, do any of you ever chew gum? Okay, everybody here in class is nodding. And of course, I have chewed gum and occasionally still do. Back in high school, I might have been accused of being addicted. I would get those giant packs of juicy fruit. And I would go through one of those in, I don't know, a week or so. But if you live in Singapore, you can't even buy gum. It's illegal. And in fact, if you were to spit out gum on the street, they have very severe penalties. Apparently, they really hate those little gobs of gum stuck to the sidewalk. Right? So in different cultures, you have different modes of behavior that are expected, the mores. Now that's true for every group. So we have the American culture. We might say we have a New Mexico state culture. And we could say that about the Navajo Nation. Obviously, there is a Navajo culture, right? And would you say that the Navajo culture is consistent? Everybody's behaves in exactly the same way? No, of course not. Within the Navajo culture, you have some tension in the mores between the people who are traditional type of Navajos and people who still follow some of the traditional mores, but may feel more impatient with some of the traditional Navajo modes of behavior.
Interesting analysis.
I
said interesting analysis.
Well, I mean, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. Right, but I have had students that feel like they're very traditional, like they are following the traditional Navajo mores. And I've had students that have expressed disgust and disdain for the traditional Navajo mores. Now, is either one of those groups correct?
No.
No, of course not. It's only what is correct for them. You know, so when we're talking about the mores of a culture or a society, only a few are going to be totally followed or believed by everyone, right? So, is murder wrong? Okay, Mr. Donahue is willing to go out on a limb and say yes.
Depends on the murder and the type.
See, already we have some different points of views. Some people would distinguish that by saying that murder is wrong, but sometimes killing is right.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, so if you decide that you are going to murder your wife, a colleague, a random person on the street, we would say, yeah, that seems like it's definitely wrong. But if you kill someone in self-defense, everybody has a right to self-defense. At least that's what I believe. Some people don't believe that. In fact, in England, they have gone absolutely crazy about that, to the point where not only can you not own a gun, or you have to register your knives, and defending yourself can get you put in prison. Thank dog I don't live in England, even though I do like that country. So everyone can agree on that. Or we will assume for the moment we can all agree on that. Now, there are people that go out and murder. Right? You have serial killers, you have people kill people for gain, their business partner, or
For fun.
random people on the street for fun is not unknown, I'm afraid. Right, but in general, society agrees. Murder, bad, wrong. But there are other things where there's less agreement. How many people here have ever sped? Gone over the speed limit, I should say.
Never.
Okay. So Victoria's claiming never. Winter, what about you?
Plenty of time.
I have a perfect driving record.
Okay, so we all kind of agree speeding is wrong, but inadvertently or advertently, that's something that we've all done.
Nope.
No? Only inadvertently you've done it?
In thought.
Okay, so wait, you've never been like driving 30 miles an hour and then you notice the speed limit is 25?
No, not consciously. Not purposely.
Okay, well, I'm not saying purposely. Because it's speeding whether you do it on purpose or not.
You know I'm being a devil's advocate, right?
I actually had made that assumption. But being the devil's advocate is so useful a lot of times
It's
that
fun.
the Catholic Church actually has an office of the devil's advocate.
No way.
Yeah. Somebody is appointed to be the devil's advocate in the Vatican councils.
Cool.
Because when everybody thinks exactly the same, nobody thinks very much, as the old saying goes. So they recognized that early on and said, you know what, we're just gonna go ahead and we'll have somebody who represents the devil and brings up a different viewpoint. Which to me is very useful. One of the things that I see in American society a lot these days is everybody's in agreement. And usually I end up being the person who's the devil's advocate saying, well, how does that work? You're all in agreement, but none of you are talking about how we get from here, point A, where we are now, to point B, where you're agreeing that we should be. And people hate it when you bring that up. But that's one of the dangers of being an industrial engineer. You're used to thinking in terms of what is the process? What are the logistical steps between where we are now and where we want to be in the future? And not a lot of people think in those terms. It's real easy to throw out lots of blue skies, rainbows and lollipops type thinking without ever stopping to think, wait, how do we get from where we are now to being where we want to be in the future? Okay, so mores are bound up with our culture. Culture is something that is inherent, as I said, in every group. For example, there is a culture here in our group. Now, it's not a well-developed culture. And that's because culture, first of all, it develops more and more over history, and we have a pretty short history, right? We have 30-some hours that we are together in some way, right? And that's not even all of us being here together at the same time, because we have people that are attending by Zoom, and we have people that are attending this class by actually watching the video later and laughing at me for all these nonsensical statements I'm throwing out. All right, I'm projecting there. I don't know how they're reacting to these videos. So we have a bunch of different cultures going around, and each culture has its own mores, right? Now you came into this class assuming certain mores, right? You came in assuming that you don't bring a boombox and play Fight the Power during the class. Well, all right, that's an extreme example maybe. But, right, you assume that you're going to come into this class, you're going to sit in your seat, you're going to learn things, that maybe you made the assumption you're going to be bored for a lot of this class. But there are certain assumptions that were inherent to your coming into this class. And that as a result, you were going to behave in a certain way, right? Now, we could pull a, damn it, what is the Robin Williams film where he's a teacher and he tells his students to get up on their desks?
Something about poetry?
Poetry?
Something about poetry.
Yes, it was something about poetry.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
It's a good movie. For the Army? Is that the one you're referring to?
Army.
No, that's different.
Well, okay, it actually doesn't matter for the moment.
Hmm.
The idea being, though, that you come into class, you have certain expectations, and a lot of times they're understood by everyone, the professor, the students, and occasionally you'll have somebody who will break out of the expectation. For one thing, I would never tell y'all to stand on your desks, because to begin with, these desks are a damn shaky proposition. For another thing, you might have to stand on the chair to get on the desk, and standing on a chair with wheels is a dumbass idea like you can't even believe. That is a way to fall and break your nollie prat.
Dead Poet Society.
That's the one. And when you break your nollie prat, once it heals, it's never the same nollie prat that it was before. Now you may be asking yourselves, what the hell is a nollie prat? I don't know. That's something my grandmother used to say.
Probably an old flame.
Well, there you have me. She would never admit to having any old flame except my grandfather. And unfortunately, he died when I was 6 months old.
Man.
Well, in life we're essentially only guaranteed that life will come to an end at some point. Okay, so our mores are inherent in our culture, and the expectations that you have coming to a class here are different than the expectations you might have going to a class at another university. So, for example, I had gone for both my bachelor's and master's degrees in Texas, right? And the behavior of university students there was that everybody would come, they would be fairly well dressed, but usually the women were extremely sharply dressed. When I went to Ohio University to work on my doctorate, I was shocked by how the students would come to class. I mean, I would have female students come to my class. Their hair is sticking out in every direction. They're obviously wearing their pajamas. And I mean, I just could not believe that. You would never have seen that in Texas. Right? But that was, now I should say though that I was at Ohio University. And Ohio University is famous mostly for one thing. And that is being a very hard party school. And that's not something I actually knew when I went there. That might have caused me to pause about even applying. I went there because one of my old professors was teaching there, and it was somebody I liked very much and admired. And I said, well, you know, this will be a good chance to learn. And of course, in graduate school, people tend to be a little more serious, even at those hard party schools. Because it's, well, let me put it this way. In graduate school, if you get a C, that's like getting an F in your undergraduate education. I mean, if you get a C, they start asking you where you're thinking, when you're thinking of leaving school or transferring. So anyway, you know, I just found that behavior was kind of bizarre to me. That was not any part of the mores I had learned either when I was getting my bachelor's degree or my master's degree. So now I didn't go to engineering school back in the day when everybody wore a white shirt, a narrow black tie, and slacks. Although I have to admit that has a certain amount of attraction. In fact, I was considered very rebellious because I wore slaps all the time, even in the winter. Well, of course, winter in South Texas is a lot different from winter here in New Mexico. I'm sure y'all noticed the snow on the ground this morning. In South Texas, really the worst we had was most of the time was rain. It does occasionally snow down there, but that's a very rare event. Okay, but I digress. All right, so mores are bound up with our cultural units, even to the point where your family has mores that you may not even recognize as mores. When I was a kid, my father was an atheist and my mother was an agnostic. They didn't know what religion not to bring the children up in. To steal an old joke.
Wow.
So the first time I had dinner at a friend's house and they said grace before eating, I was very confused. I was like, what is this? Right? Because that was not one of the mores of our family. Right? So our mores are bound up with our cultural units. Now, in engineering, we also have mores, although usually we describe them as a code of ethics, right? So finally, what I've got up here on the screen begins to make some sense in terms of what I'm talking about. And apparently Victoria could hardly wait for that part.
Finally. I'm just kidding.
to talk to you about this a little bit because people who take this class are in the engineering and technology field, right? And codes of ethics in general have a lot of overlapping elements, right? Whether we're talking the Ten Commandments or the English common law, there's a lot of stuff that overlaps. Now, admittedly, in the English common law, it doesn't forbid worshiping graven images. So there are some differences, right? But theft, murder are forbidden in both. Coveting is not usually part of any legal code that I'm aware of. And there are some differences in different codes of law based on whether you are guilty until proven innocent or innocent until proven guilty. For example, under the Napoleonic Code, which, like it sounds like, came in when Napoleon was Emperor of France, you are guilty until you're proven innocent. Same deal in China. So my advice is, if you go to China, avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Now, in the American Code of Laws, which derive from the English common law, we say you're innocent until proven guilty. Although my lawyer friends laugh at that proposition. They feel as though there is a presumption of guilt to begin with. All right, so there's a lot of overlap in the different codes of ethics. Now, what I have up here on the screen is the National Society of Professional Engineers Code of Ethics. And this is particularly crafted for engineering and technology, of course. So the preamble. Engineering is an important and learned profession. As members of this profession, engineers are expected to exhibit the highest standards of honesty and integrity. Okay, so from the beginning, they're saying that we need to exhibit honesty and integrity. Engineering has a direct and vital impact on the quality of life for all people. Accordingly, the services provided by engineers require honesty, impartiality, fairness, and equity, and must be dedicated to the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare. Okay, so this implies that in engineering and technology, we have a higher duty than just not to break the law, but also to, protect the public. Engineers must perform under a standard of professional behavior that requires adherence to the highest principles of ethical conduct. Okay, well, now, obviously, this is something that is entirely to our advantage. Engineering is a branch of science. We have to be able to trust scientists and those working in science, since we could argue that being engineers is not the same as being scientists. Scientists explore the basic principles. Engineers exploit those principles to make products and services. Fundamental canons. In this case, you'll notice canons is spelled with 2 N's, not 3, meaning rules. Engineers, in fulfillment of their professional duties, shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. So once again, the highest duty is the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Perform services only in the areas of their competence. 3, issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner. 4, act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees. 5, avoid deceptive acts. 6, conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, and lawfully, so as to enhance the honor, reputation, and usefulness of the profession. All right, so these 6 fundamental canons lay down the basic outline of what engineers are expected to do in performance of their duty. Okay? You can see this Code of Ethics on the NSPE.org website, right? And there is a tab that says Ethics. And under that tab, you see all kinds of interesting stuff. One is this Code of Ethics. You can also read about people who were weighed in the balance and found wanting because, well, for example, I have a professional engineering license in Texas. In Texas, they actually have, I wouldn't call it a court, but they have a body that you can bring a professional engineer in front of if you feel they have violated some tenet of the of the professional engineers code of ethics. Two, rules of practice. Engineers shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. A, if the engineer's judgment is overruled under circumstances that endanger life or property, they shall notify their employer or client and such other authority as may be appropriate. Okay, so you have a duty to speak up if somebody's life or property is endangered by actions. B, engineers shall approve only those engineering documents that are in conformity with applicable standards. Okay, so one of the things that professional engineers do is they stamp off on documents. Now, as an industrial engineer, I'm in an unusual position in that regard. I remember one of my mentors saying to me when I was getting my professional engineer's license that he had been a professional engineer for 20 years and had never stamped off on a document. Very often, the people who stamp off on documents are civil and mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, structural engineers. For example, building plans. We have a bunch of building plans in 322, and all of those had to be stamped off by professional engineers who approved the structural elements, the mechanical elements such as the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, plumbing, etc., the electrical elements. C, engineers shall not reveal facts, data, or information without the prior consent of the client or employer except as authorized or required by law or this code. Okay, so you have a duty of confidentiality towards clients or employers. D, engineers shall not permit the use of their name or associate in business ventures with any person or firm they believe is engaged in fraudulent or dishonest enterprise. Okay, so again, the engineers and by extension technologists have a duty towards honesty and integrity. E, engineers shall not aid or abet the unlawful practice of engineering by a person or firm. Okay, so no unlawful practicing. F, engineers having knowledge of any alleged violation of this code shall report thereon to appropriate professional bodies and, when relevant, also to public authorities, and cooperate with the proper authorities in furnishing such information or assistance as may be required. It did look at one point as though I might have to report somebody. Um, but the problem went away when the project didn't go forward. But these were people who were engineers that designed highways and runways, and they were doing the engineering drawings for a building, which is somewhat of a specialized field. Now, I had worked in building engineering many, many years ago with really my first engineering job when I was still an undergraduate. And I worked there as a draftsman. This is back in the day when the very first CAD programs were being brought out, but we did everything paper and pencil or paper and pen. All right. 2, engineers shall perform services only in the areas of their competence. Engineers shall undertake assignments only when qualified by education or experience in the specific technical fields involved. Okay, so education seems kind of obvious. We don't want people designing dams, as an example, who haven't been through civil engineering school and learned about the hydraulic wedge and other things of this nature, because it really sucks when dams fail. I mean, people are killed, other people get all upset. Okay, well, people aren't necessarily killed when dams fail, but that certainly can be an outcome. And of course that has happened. All right, 2B. Engineers shall not affix their signatures to any plans or documents dealing with subject matter in which they lack competence, nor to any plan or document not prepared under their direction and control. I actually had a friend ask me to stamp off on a document. He owns 2 lots in Corpus Christi, and he wanted to divide it into the 2 lots and sell one of them. And he said, "Harry, come on, you're a professional engineer, you can sign off on this." And I said, "No, I can't. First of all, I'm not a surveyor, and what you have is essentially a sketch of the properties, not an engineering drawing. Second of all, that's not my area. That would be a violation of my oath as a professional engineer." Well, luckily, this is a friend who's shall we say, easily distracted. So he had soon forgotten about this and was on to another plan. All right, 2C. Engineers may accept assignments and assume responsibility for coordination of an entire project and sign and seal the engineering documents for the entire project, provided that each technical segment is signed and sealed only by the qualified engineers who prepared the segment. Okay, so for most of my life, I have done project management. Even to the point where right now, I am managing our project here to start an environmental engineering program. Now, do I know about environmental engineering? Well, I took air pollution control back in the day, but that's really kind of the extent of my technical training. I've learned a lot of things informally. But I am an excellent project manager. I've managed everything from projects where we essentially had no money to multi-million-dollar contracts. Right? And I'm very comfortable within the confines of being able to manage other technical professions. Three, engineers shall issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner. 3A, engineers shall be objective and truthful in professional reports, statements, or testimony. They shall include all relevant and pertinent information in such reports, statements, or testimony, which should bear the date indicating when it was current. You may have noticed how often I emphasize in this class not only having your name and the subject matter in your file names, but also the date. That is going to be important, not because any of this homework or quizzes are important. I mean, as soon as this class is over and you pass, I'm betting you're going to forget them all. But down the line, that's important. Making sure that information is truthful and what date it is truthful is kind of important. Also, associating yourself with information that you know about. You write a report, your name should be on the report somewhere. Now, sometimes we're going to end up, we're writing reports for our bosses. But even then, there should be something in the report that says that you contributed to that report. 3B, engineers may express publicly technical opinions that are founded upon knowledge of the facts and competence in the subject matter. Okay, so we wanna be careful not to be shooting our mouths off about crap we don't know about. Actually, an excellent idea for everyone, but with our American ideal of free speech, we sometimes have people that have less than competent opinions espousing them. And just because they're politicians doesn't mean, oh, wait, no, because they're politicians, they should be more truthful. But of course, they're not. 3C, engineers shall issue no statements, criticisms, or arguments on technical matters that are inspired or paid for by interested parties unless they have prefaced their comments by explicitly identifying the interested parties on whose behalf they are speaking, and by revealing the existence of any interest the engineers may have in the matters. Okay, so you're hired to speak for Dow Chemical about the safety and efficacy of one of their products. You need to be stating that up front, and not just, oh, I'm an engineer and I'm interested in letting the public know. Four, engineers shall act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees. 4A, engineers shall disclose all known or potential conflicts of interest that could influence or appear to influence their judgment or the quality of their services. When I worked for Texas A&M, we actually had to write out a new conflict of interest statement every year. And theoretically, we were required to amend our conflict of interest statement if we had any changes to it. So for example, every year I would have to put down that that I was a trainer for the local stagehands union. Even though, I mean, bloody hell, how could that have affected my engineering opinion? That really seems unlikely. But we had to, anything that generated any income had to be reported. And even though I didn't get paid by the union for training apprentices, I still reported that, feeling like that was something that had to be done. I did occasionally do gigs with the union still, but not so often. Working in the entertainment industry has brutal hours. 4C, engineers shall not solicit or accept financial or other valuable consideration directly or indirectly from outside agents in connection with the work for which they are responsible. Okay, so this is further into the conflict of interest, right? You can't take money from suppliers who are supplying equipment for a project or services or materials for a project you're working on. In fact, depending on who you work for, there may be very, very strict rules. For example, the federal government caps what can be given to a government employee at $5. Well, maybe they've increased that by now, maybe not. But once a government employee and I were at a meeting, and they hadn't brought a pen, so I actually gave them one of my little Bic 4-color pens. And they're like, I can't take that. I'm like, dude, man, it's $2 to get one. You're okay. 4D, engineers in public service as members, advisors, or employees of a governmental or quasi-governmental body or department shall not participate in decisions with respect to services solicited or provided by them or their organizations in private or public engineering practice. Okay, so if you are a member of the local water board, say, but you're also an engineer with a local firm that is going to build levees for the water board, you can't vote for your firm to be building those levees. That would be unethical. 4E, engineers shall not solicit or accept a contract from a governmental body on which a principal or officer of their organization serves as a member. Okay, so if you are an ordinary member of the engineering firm that is going to build the levee and you're on the water board, you're all right. If you are a partner or the lead engineer, that would actually exclude your firm from even bidding on the contract. All right, 5, engineers shall avoid deceptive acts. I am not going to go into all the ways that you can deceive, even though I have studied them. And Victoria is very disappointed when I say that.
Mm-hmm. Extremely.
5A, engineers shall not falsify their qualifications or permit misrepresentation of their or their associates' qualifications. They shall not misrepresent or exaggerate their responsibility in or for the subject matter of prior assignments. Brochures or other presentations incident to the solicitation of employment shall not misrepresent pertinent facts concerning employers, employees, associates, joint venturers, or past accomplishments. This is one where I have wrestled in prayer with some of the administrators here at NTU for a long time. if you were to look in the catalog, you will see that it lists my bachelor's degree and my master's degree as having been given to me by Texas A&M University. That is not true. I keep trying to get them to change it. I got my bachelor's degree from Texas A&I University, not M, and I got my master's degree from Texas A&M University, comma, Kingsville, which is not the same as Texas A&M University. Okay, so having been reminded of that, now I'm feeling like I'm gonna have to go back and wrestle in prayer with these guys some more. Now, is this a huge deal? I have a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering. I have a master's of science in industrial engineering. Does it really make that big a difference? Well, it might.
When money is involved, maybe.
Well, and how often is money involved in what we do here?
All the time.
Exactly. Arguably, Texas A&M University is a more prestigious university. Don't get me wrong, I love Texas A&I University, which admittedly later became Texas A&M University, Kingsville. So I actually have both degrees from the same school, but they changed names in the middle. But it is deceptive to say, to just gloss that over and say, oh, Texas A&M University. Boy, now I feel like I have to go fight with them about it again. All right. This is 5B, I believe. Now I gotta go back and see. Yes, 5B. Engineers shall not offer, give, solicit, or receive, either directly or indirectly, any contribution to influence the award of a contract by public authority, or which may be reasonably construed by the public as having the effect or intent of influencing the awarding of a contract. They shall not offer any gift or other valuable consideration in order to secure work. They shall not pay a commission, percentage, or brokerage fee in order to secure work, except to a bona fide employee or bona fide established commercial or marketing agencies retained by them. I'm sorry, I was arguing with myself whether that should be agency. Okay, so we don't go around bribing people to give us work. Is possibly the short way to say that. All right, are there any questions on what I've talked about today? All right, because I am going to, Damn it, I thought Mr. Nez had a question, but no, he was adjusting his mask. I'm going to stop here and we'll pick up with professional obligations, next time. All right, so are there, any, last questions? If not, I am going to stop sharing and I will talk to you again at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. It's the most ethical time of the year.